All right. Welcome to Let's Talk About It Tuesday. I'm Georgette. I'm the mom.
And I'm TJ, I'm the son.
And we both live and work and play in psychology.
And this is all over the cat.
Yeah. And we are passionate about sharing what we know with you so that you can live your best life. So today we're going to talk about mistakes.
Ooh. Cool.
Mistakes. So we talk a lot about biases, cognitive biases. There is a bias that's called the sunk cost fallacy. And basically it says that we have a hard time moving on when we've invested resources, which can be time, money, even effort on something or even someone, right?
Yeah. It was all for waste. It was all for nothing. It all came crashing down at once. Yeah, overgeneralization.
But we stay in those relationships. We keep hanging on because we want to get our investment back. But we have to understand that there are some costs that just cannot be recouped, right? Sometimes you cut your losses, right? The reason we hang on are twofold. In one instance, we don't want to be wasteful, right? You hate waste. I know you hate waste, right? And also we don't like losses, right? But it's important to not base future decisions on those sunk costs that we have.
Well, because that's what the brain is already doing, is putting the reasons why you shouldn't do it in the forefront of your mind, because that is, just a little bit easier as far as the brain is concerned. So you have to consciously kind of bring your attention to, what you would gain, what you may lose in the short term, and what you may gain in the long term. Because if you don't, your brain's necessarily going to do it on its own.
Right. And I guess at some point we don't think of it as a lost investment because we learned from it, right?
We have to find some way to balance it, because if you don't, it's going to be left unbalanced, which is going to leave people with just unhelpful emotions, and then thinking that it's not coming from anything in particular, but there actually is reasons.
Right. So when you make a mistake, what should you do, like cognitively speaking? And the first suggestion is to reframe your thinking. Like I was saying earlier, it's not a total loss if you've learned something.
What thoughts got you to make the mistake? What was the mistake? What was the things that led to it? What was the emotion that you felt? What were the impulses that were felt? What exactly did the thought sound like? What could be a little bit deeper of a meaning? Because if you don't reframe it, you are going to continue to make the same mistake, because your brain is not looking to learn anew when it comes to stimuli. It likes to just look and just judge and assume it already knows what's going on. So you have to get in there first.
Right. And then allow yourself to make mistakes. It makes you human. It makes you more compassionate.
You have to consciously give yourself more empathy, because we are our own worst critics, and it's something that nobody does very well on their own. But it's something that when you learn that it is a skill that needs to be developed, you have to consciously give yourself some of that empathy first, and then it'll become a little bit easier. Because if not, you're gonna, never think that you're good enough, because it's a little bit easy to get caught in that.
Acknowledge your feelings. Be a friend to yourself.
Validate that you deserve to feel the emotion, even though the level of it may be past what it should be. It is there for a reason. It is there to warn you. It is there to tell you that something needs to be done, which is why we're reframing and accepting these mistakes. Because not acknowledging your feelings and pushing it away, not worrying about it, is one way to, not leave it unbalanced.
Live in the present. Don't worry about the past.
Yeah,
Focus on the big picture. Where are you headed?
Because when you're driving and you get cut off on the road and you start cursing and hating that person with every fiery passion, you can really stop and think, in 6 months' time, even going to remember that person cutting you off. Is there plenty of more helpful things that could be said in those moments, right? Somebody cuts you off. Have you ever cut somebody off accidentally? Probably. Did that person wake up with the intention of cutting me off specifically today? No. Maybe that person's just an asshole. If they're an asshole on the road, maybe they're an asshole in other avenues of their life. So I have to find some way to balance it, the bigger picture, because for a lot of the goals that I have, it's not going to do me any favor to hold on to the tension of being cut off on the road. It's not going to do me any tension of holding on to tension with people in my life. It's not going to do me any good thinking about the hurtful thing that Betty Sue Lou said about me, because it has nothing to do with the big picture. And so easily do we let go of the big picture, especially when it comes to a really small mistake, which is what most of our mistakes are, until our emotions blow to be a much bigger thing.
Right. Don't label yourself a failure. It doesn't define you.
Yeah.
Mistakes do not define you.
Because if you have that core belief, I'm a failure, I'm a failure, I'm a failure, now it doesn't matter what happens in your life. It's going to be kind of attached to I'm a failure, which is going to make everything very unhappy. So I have failed. I have made a mistake. I am not a mistake. I am not a failure. And your brain doesn't automatically make these decisions. In fact, it's much more likely that you're going to label yourself as opposed to the situation itself. So separate yourself consciously and identify that we all fail and make mistakes, and it is our emotions that make it a much bigger deal, because logically, and some of those things that we just mentioned, there's always things to bring you back to some level of balance.
Right. Learn and then keep your sense of humor. Those are the things that you can do in the moment, right?
Sometimes learning is all you can do. Wow, that really sucked. I would really like for this not to happen again. Maybe that's it. Keep your sense of humor. For a lot of times, it's going to be you and you. Sometimes we say this, sometimes it's so ridiculous, it's almost laughable. I think you should consciously make more things laughable, because when you meet with people and you just laugh at some of their faults as opposed to maybe get mad at some of their faults, it's a really big difference in progression or ways to handle it. So yeah, keep your sense of humor, laugh at yourself, laugh at others, because once again, your brain's a little bit more of an asshole than you are.
Right. So, but looking long term, you really need to change your mindset as well. So yes, there's a way you should think about things when you're making the mistake in the moment, but also changing your mindset for the future. Avoid playing it safe. So playing it safe, what that does is it creates a mindset of mistake intolerance. You're afraid to make mistakes, and so when you do, you're intolerant about them. So you don't want to play it safe, right? And one thing I read that I thought was really interesting is we educate children to know the right answer, not to discover it. Which I thought was really cool, because we really need to teach them how to discover things, because in discovery, you make mistakes, right? Yeah. And that's how you learn.
Well, in response to both of those, avoid playing it safe. Playing it safe creates a mindset of mistake. Intolerance, you should make it a point that there should be at least one thing that is outside of your comfort zone, one thing that is an exposure that you would deem challenging, that you, dare I say, would not necessarily be looking forward to. And obviously maybe more than just one, but at the very least that. And in terms of the education, instead of just telling people what to do, one of the most positive feedback that I have gotten in terms of the group dynamic that we present is that we do a lot of educational stuff, and people enjoy it so much more when you tell them why, as opposed to just telling them to do so. It is crazy the difference. People with 30 years of unhelpful experiences with psychology, for some reason, this is the one that works. Just education is more important than anything. So in terms of mistakes, what's the big education here? You're going to automatically be hard on yourself. You have to constantly identify, why you're not. It's going to be very easy for your mistakes to pop up a little bit more subconsciously than your more positive things. So you have to shine light more consciously on the more positive things, maybe allowing that to be more of a conscious pathway that you practice that eventually becomes subconscious, right? Because your brain will drive yourself crazy, will drive you crazy in terms of your mistakes until you consciously balance it and do the hard work.
Right. So in order to develop a mistake tolerance mindset, there's some suggestions. Embrace a trial and error approach. Own your mistakes. Turn your mistakes into lessons. Label the mistake, not yourself. Screw up, practice making mistakes, right? And don't be afraid to ask colleagues or friends for help or perspective.
Yeah, you should ask friends, because one of the best way to reframe something is if a friend came to you with a similar mistake or the similar issue, what would you say? Because your advice to friends are going to be much more condensed, much more nice, much more straight to the point. So when you ask your friends, you're going to get that in return instead of your crazy emotions that are making it a lot harder to see what's most likely a very obvious answer.
So changing your mindset in the moment, or changing your cognitive thinking in the moment, changing your mindset. Now let's talk about changing the culture, right, of everyone around us. You want to promote a culture where mistakes are encouraged, because if you do so, you'll produce more risk takers, and it will result in more creative and innovative thinking. So don't laugh at somebody if they say something that seems stupid.
Think of all of you that were laughed at for trying something, and some of the things that you regret not going forward because somebody made fun of you. And going back to, it's gonna be very easy for us to judge. Oh, that person's this, but good for them. Good for you. change the culture, consciously do this, and realize that it's very easy for this culture to be kind of wrapped around mistakes being a little bit more of the highlight.
Right. If mistakes are encouraged, what happens is people will typically own up to them and move on from them very quickly.
Boom. Oh, preach. My goodness. Make a mistake. Yeah. Accept it. Move on. It's crazy, isn't it? People that are watching this. Jeez Louise.
If you're too close to a decision, ask for feedback from someone else.
We kind of talked about that.
Share ideas with coworkers and friends, and celebrate lessons and reward risk takers.
Yeah, that's what you got to get at the end of some of those things is a reward for your reasons doing it. Lessons. What can I take from this? What is the purpose, even if the purpose isn't the most positive thing in the world? Because if I leave it unresolved, my brain is going to leave it unresolved, and that will result in some unhelpful emotions that is going to start to generalize and peek its way into everything else. So
something else we can do is increase our intellectual humility. I like this idea. Think about the possibility that you may be wrong, right? You may possibly be wrong, and be open to learning from the experience of others, right? It's about being actively curious about your blind spots.
Asking questions. Why am I thinking this? What's the real reason? What's this?
It requires making a habit about thinking about your limits, which can be painful for some of us, right?
Until you continuously do it more and it becomes a little bit easier to kind of put yourself on the spot like that.
When they look at people who fill out intellectual humility questionnaires, one thing they learn is people who score higher in that trait are open to hearing opposing views.
Yeah, a lot more you think you're open to hearing opposing views than you think. Let me preach that real quick.
They may more readily seek out information that conflicts with their worldview, which is always important to do.
Constantly check it. Check yourself.
Yeah.
For you wreck yourself.
We have that confirmation bias. We tend to believe things we already that already align with our thoughts, and it's good to question that. That's how growth happens, right?
If you don't consciously do it, you're going to leave yourself with the exact same thoughts that could have been started when you were a kid. And imagine how smart we were when we were kids.
Those people who have that intellectual humility pay more attention to evidence and have a stronger self-awareness when they question, when they answer a question incorrectly. So I think that's
intelligence, reason, logic. What normally gets what normally gets kind of fallen by the wayside with emotions.
As adults, we tend to think about developing in terms of what's called reflective judgment. It's a way that adults reason through things like current events, religion, science, personal relationships, any of those controversial topics that come up, in memes and other places and social networks. And there's different levels of reflective judgment, and you've seen them because you get frustrated when people exhibit them, but you probably also exhibit them yourselves from time to time, depending on your passion and depending on your interest in a particular topic. But there's the first stage is pre-reflective reasoning, and in this stage you don't recognize that some knowledge is uncertain. You're pretty set in your ways. You might want an answer to a complex problem, which is sometimes very difficult to provide, right? You might hold a position on a controversial issue without acknowledging that there are opposing positions. They're not critical thinkers, which is really what we need in this world, is some critical thinkers, right? And then the next stage is quasi-reflective reasoning, where you're more likely to believe that nothing can be known for certain, and you may change your conclusions based on the situation and evidence. So you're kind of more open to different ideas. You understand that information can be subjective, and you may agree to disagree with people who have opposing viewpoints. And then the final stage is reflective reasoning. Oops. And in reflective reasoning, that's when you show true reflective judgment. You understand that people build knowledge when they analyze situations, and that you continue to be open to new evidence and reevaluating your beliefs. So it's really important to think about that in terms of growth. Just in general, you're less likely to make mistakes if you have that increased intellectual humility and you are open to other people's ideas.
What she said.
I think that is all that I had for today.
You got to read that? That big picture is going to sit there just for nothing.
I know, but I can't
Why don't you
scroll
be smarter
because
than?
that's not the mouse. That's the
Oh.
wrong mouse. Here it is. Okay. Here's a quote that I really like. Opinion is really the lowest form of human knowledge. It requires no accountability, no understanding. The highest form of knowledge is empathy. For it requires us to suspend our egos and live in another's world. And so that goes back to that intellectual humility and using that reflective judgment.
Mm.
So this week, you're likely to make one or two mistakes. We hope you do. We hope you make some mistakes because then you can utilize those strategies we've given you to deal with your mistakes, and maybe also gives you an opportunity to challenge your own mindset. So we want you to embrace risk taking and get comfortable with that process regardless of the results, right? And increase your intellectual humility by considering the fact you might be wrong sometimes, and be more reflective in your reasoning. All right. Have a great week, and we will see you. Let's next talk about it Tuesday.